I'm Adam Holton, and I work with story in my capacity as an author and as a public typist. And by public typist, I mean I sit in public spaces with the typewriter and a sign that says, give me 3 words and a name for a character and 5 minutes, and I will improvise and create you a story on the spot that's about an A5 page long, inspired by the words you give me to play with. Some of the most interesting experiences I get to have as the person doing the typing of the stories is to see people go through a wave of relief sometimes, to cry or to laugh at something that the story has provoked somehow, and that is also part of this desire to, and why I think it's important to create these stories in public, is so people feel seen and feel heard in a really unexpected way. Being open to distraction allows us to see beauty in life. I'm giving people a space where they can trust somebody else, or that they are brave enough to try and trust someone else. And I think that act is what people would have historically given to a storyteller in a way that you cannot give to a television or a cinema screen or a computer screen or even a radio. You give your trust to the storyteller, hoping to understand something deeper about yourself or humanity. So after I have invited people to give me 3 words and a name, I sit, I type the story, and when the story comes to an end, either when the feeling in me changes and I feel there's a distinct end to the story that I'm typing, or I get to the bottom of the page, I take it out of the typewriter and I hold it in both hands and I hand it back to the person who's given me the words as a gift, as a way of connecting with that person, and then it is theirs, truly, fully theirs. I don't hold on to it. I can't do anything else with it. It's now theirs. And for me, it feels like giving someone a gift, like it's kind of a respect, like you have been brave enough to trust me and give me these words to play with, and now I am giving you back what I have seen in my imagination. The fact that there is a physical piece of paper with printed, typed words and a story on it, I think is quite significant for people, because at a point in time where a lot of interaction or experiences in life are not in a physical, tangible realm, the physical object of the story has a really memorable weight and heft to it for a person. It feels like something to treasure, something to hold, like literally to hold close and to keep. And for those who enjoy their stories, I've had people come up and say, oh, I framed it and it's on a wall in my house or my mantelpiece, or I've put it in a place of importance. And it allows them to go back to it at any point in their life and to find something in that experience or that memory that can hopefully nourish them. Maybe it gives them hope, maybe it's a reminder that things aren't always as you expect them to be, especially in public, and it's something they helped create.
My name is Emily Hennessey, and I am a storyteller living in Cumbria, with the lakes and the fells and the forests and the stories. And yeah, I work as a storyteller, which means I tell stories. So I tell stories from all over the world. I tell stories that are usually quite old stories, sometimes hundreds of years old, sometimes thousands of years old. Sometimes they are folk tales, stories about people and people's challenges and obstacles and interactions and questions and lives. And sometimes they are fairy tales, wonder tales, stories with a bit of magic in. And sometimes I tell myths and epics, stories of the gods and the big questions and the elements and all sorts of exciting cosmic stuff. Stories that are so old but that I feel are still so relevant to our lives today. And I love telling them. I didn't plan to be a storyteller. It just sort of happened. I suppose as when I was younger, I loved reading stories. And I loved listening to stories. I loved reading Roald Dahl more than anything. I loved the naughtiness of these stories and how they felt like a bit of a rebellion in the world. And they were all about children who could do amazing things and children who are brave and fantastic. Which is, of course, something that we find in folk tales all the time, stories about how, children can be brilliant and children can be brave and children can be cleverer than grown-ups and giants and trolls. Yeah, so I thought I wanted to write stories initially, to create my own stories. And then I ended up at university down in Kent doing a drama course. And there was a taster module in storytelling. And it was led by an Indian storyteller called Dr. Vayu Naidu. And in that first lesson, I remember we were sitting in a little black box studio and she told us a story. She told us one of the Indian myths, and there was no costume and there was no props and there was no set, there was no scenery, there was no music, there was nothing really except for her and us and her words and a few simple gestures and our imaginations. And yet, when I look back on that moment, what I see is the whole of the story that she created, as though we were there in the middle of the story, in the middle of this ancient Indian myth with gods and painted elephants and peacocks. And there is so much colour and there is so much life. And it's a kind of magic, really, like how that is possible, with nothing except our imaginations, really, and these words to paint pictures. That something can be so real and visceral and almost tangible and so live and alive and powerful and exciting. So that was the start of my storytelling journey, really. I thought, wow, that's amazing. Let's see how that works. And it turns out it's one of those things that looks really, really, really easy and effortless. And annoyingly, it's actually really difficult. It's really difficult and there is so much involved and so much to think about, and yet it's also the most natural thing in the world to share a story, to tell a story. I'm still learning to do it now. This was over 20 years ago that I started, and I feel like I'm still just beginning, really, with every story that I come across and I think, oh yeah, this is a story that is really interesting or exciting or strange or weird, and I want to try telling this story. I feel like I'm kind of starting at the beginning again. You sort of say to people, oh, you're a storyteller, and they go, oh, great, you read stories for children. And actually, that's not what I do. It's something very different, and it's not just for children, because adults need stories as well. We need stories because they bring us together, first of all, and there is nothing quite like being in a room together with other people and sharing the same world of the imagination, all at the same time, being kind of transported and yet all in the same place. There's something amazing about that moment, and knowing that's only going to happen once as well. Even if that storyteller tells the same story 100 times, it's going to be different every single time, depending on who is in the room and what the space is and what time of day it is and what the weather is outside and what everyone's day has been like and what else is going on and whose mobile phone goes off in that particular moment in the story. And all these things contribute to that special live moment. So they change all the time. It's like they have a life of their own, really, is how I think of it. And you never quite know what it's going to be like until you're there in the live moment and it's all happening and unfolding, and anything can happen, really.
My name is Jonathan Cowie and I'm the editor of Folk magazine, and I have an editing background. So I guess what I do with stories is I collect stories. So I might find stories from different places. I might see something that really catches my imagination. People might come to me saying, "Oh, I've got this amazing idea," or "I've got this story that I want to tell." So I guess I see myself as like a curator of these stories. So I will take something that someone's written, or take a story like an old traditional tale, and then take those stories and kind of, it's almost like chipping away at them. So chipping away at trying to get to the heart of what the person wants to say, or the heart of that story. And then it's sharing those stories. It's taking them to a new audience. It's giving them life. It's giving them life, especially for like the old tales. It's breathing new life into them. Yeah, and giving them a platform. So Folk is a magazine that comes out every now and again when I feel like it. But it's about northern folklore. So the first issue was all about the Lake District, but it's very much a mixture of contemporary and traditional folklore, and it's beautifully illustrated by a friend of mine, Guy, who's done these amazing kind of like line drawings that kind of weave all the way through the magazine. So it's a real, like, it's a little labour of love, but it's celebrating the North, and it's celebrating northern folklore, and it's celebrating northern people. There's so many stories around water, like, you know, think about tales of like Atlantis, all the kind of stories about like selkies and mermaids, and I guess in landscape. So for me, like folk tales aren't this kind of this kind of like stories from the past. It's contemporary as well. So like modern folk tales are just as valid and just as interesting, if not maybe more so than kind of the old folk tales. Kind of this idea that old folk tales are kind of like ye olde England, which I don't think is true anyway. But if you like, you know, people are always like creating stories about themselves, about their surroundings, about the landscape, about people they meet, about, you know, these stories are ways that people kind of navigate their lives. So telling those stories, I think, is just as valid and as important as telling these old folk tales. The scary lady who lives on the hill in a big scary house that you know you talked about when you were a kid. You know, that is a folk tale that's just as you know, as valid and interesting as, you know, stuff about the Green Man. It all kind of comes together, and I think in folk, I really wanted to have like the contemporary and the ancient and traditional, because I think they work together. It's like they're all the same thing.